What is up, guys? My name is Dave Colagiovanni. I'm the owner to SUPRA Inspections. This is the SUPRA Show, Season 2, Podcast Edition, hanging out with my co-host, Doug Chicarico. Our guest today is Karly Grosz, real estate attorney in the Lower Hudson Valley, as well as Manhattan and Long Island. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you coming out. Karly, what's your background and how'd you get into being a real estate attorney?
So thank you for having me, first of all. I kind of just fell into it, as I was saying before. Graduated law school. I needed a job. I started off in title sales before I took the bar exam, and I met up with Andrew Romano, and the rest is history. I started doing real estate transactions, and it's all from there.
Wow. Awesome. Good stuff. So, in the last, we kind of just want to fast forward now just to kind of like this time now, like what's this market looking like and sort of, and what are some of our, buyers going to expect, in the next, or we'll just say now, and what you kind of project the next 6 months?
So right now the market's strange. It's I know it's really weird to say that, and it's not a really great explanation, but it's like you have moments where there's no inventory, there's nothing on the market, and then all of a sudden you have an influx of a bunch of homes, a bunch of buyers, and we have accepted offers, and then all of a sudden somebody's like, maybe I'm paying too much, maybe I'm not getting enough. The rates are really high. I don't know if I can afford this. And so you're getting, 5 to 10 deals a week. You're pushing out contracts, you're getting in contracts, or you're reviewing stuff, and the deal never makes it to be signed.
Wow.
So it's a little frustrating there,
Yeah.
But it's frustrating on all parts.
With that, Doug,
This market is definitely creating some challenges for buyers and even sellers and to some extent. What challenges are you seeing that they have when it comes to the contract times and from contract forward?
Honestly, I mainly see concern that am I paying too much, and what are the rates? What are the mortgage rates right now? Because the mortgage rates, seemingly are going up. Every now and again they do drop, but I think right now we're at 7.5, if I'm correct. And 7.5, from 2% about a year ago is a huge jump. And when the numbers on the houses are, up there, it's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, I mean, from contract to when they actually close, the changes that can be whether that person could afford the house or not.
Right. Because the rates are changing weekly, if not daily sometimes. And so you have somebody who put a bid in, signed contracts, thought they were going to be at 5 3/4, and now all of a sudden, the mortgage broker didn't lock the rate, because we can't lock the rate sometimes because they're, then you're getting into extension fees, and it costs a lot of money to extend your mortgage over and over again. So now all of a sudden, if you're locking in now, you're at 7.5. So that's a big difference in your mortgage payment every month.
What are things you look for in the contract when protecting your client?
So one of the main things, and I've really been pushing it on my clients lately, especially because of the way that the market is, people are selling much older homes. There's a lot more problematic things. It's not new construction. It's not renovated homes. So it's really actually pushing home inspections and making sure, a lot of the market right now is like, you have to move fast. You have to be the cash buyer. You have to do this. You have to do that to get the accepted offer, because they're bidding wars everywhere. So people are waiving inspections, which is asinine. I mean, you know very well, and you know very well. And then the biggest problem is, they've seen the house, they didn't get an inspection. There's a problem with the windows when we get to closing. They don't open, or they don't close, or there's a problem with the heat, or there's a problem with this. But something that you wouldn't have thought to check. Why would I open the window in the middle of February?
Yeah, and so what is that doing for the deal, like, per se? Like, is it just kind of just like halts the deal, like, because like, oh wait, or is it just kind of still has to go through at that point, and
Pardon
then,
my French, it's kind of screwing the buyer.
Wow, without a
Because
doubt, yeah,
at the end of the day, it's one of those things where it never made it to the contract, so it's not in there. There's nothing that I can do to protect the client. I don't go to the house. I have never been there. I've never seen it, so I can't go through and say, oh, this needs to go in the contract, this needs to go in the contract. If it's not in the contract, there's no obligation for the seller to do anything. The property is being sold in an as-is condition,
wow.
and that's it. Game over.
Wow.
So when we get there, I mean, I had a recent deal where my clients were buying I think it was a 2-family house, and they went through the walkthrough, and of course it was the problem with the windows. The windows wouldn't stay open. Some of the screens were were broken and, not. And they were like, oh, we want a credit for this. We want $300. Oh, I think it was more than that, but we want a credit for this. And I was like, I can't get you a credit for this. There's nothing in the contract about it.
No
And
way.
they had an inspection.
Yeah.
But it was never in the inspection report.
Wow.
So, it's rushed work. It's busy. It's not covering your bases.
Yeah. So when does like the seller actually like really check out of this deal? Like is it the closing? Is that that's the time where it's just like, all right, we're not negotiating anything further. Like when does the seller check out?
I mean, we can always negotiate at the table.
Oh wow.
Cool.
No way.
It's not like a big negotiation. It's something small. It's like, oh, the seller left trash behind.
Yeah.
What's the craziest situation you've had where something was about to fall apart at the table? And
Ooh, that's a good one. I've had a couple of doozies.
Yeah.
I had a woman who, she was crazy though. She was a hoarder. And she had, not only was she a hoarder, but she also hoarded cats in her backyard. So she had these cat,
the cat farm.
Like basically, but she had like these cat tree houses or like forts in the back. And she wanted us to put in the contract that they had to stay with the property, that they couldn't take them down.
That's insane.
And so I told her, I was like, we can't do that. It's not going to work. And then we get to closing and she needed more time to vacate. Seller said, okay, it was a 2-family home. So he said she can stay for 30 days. So woman wound up staying for, I want to say, almost 4 months. Thank God we held back enough money in escrow. I think we did like a $50,000 escrow on it.
Wow.
But, I mean, and I was the seller.
Oh, really?
So,
okay.
For me, I felt terribly for the buyer.
Yeah.
But, when you're taking it that way, that's the risk you're going to take.
Wow.
It's rough.
What does that look like? So like that situation where the seller is just a straight up like hoarder, has all this stuff, and I've done inspections where just like there's just like a lot of stuff in the house, just like, and you don't have to hoard stuff to have a lot of stuff these days, but I'll tell you what, like as like the only thing I think of, like especially during the home inspections, is it's like wow, they got a lot of stuff to move.
Yeah.
Now what is that? How long should that process really take to like, all right, we're closed now, like now you got to get your stuff out?
I mean, quite frankly, in my opinion, and I think Doug would agree, it should be out the day before the closing.
Wow.
If not the morning of.
That's
like you should be able to see the floor, you should be able to see the walls, you should be able to see everything in that house without obstruction.
Yeah, that is
and every outlet.
Is that like an unspoken rule now? I'm telling you, that's a great idea to just.
Unfortunately,
it's a great
not.
rule.
Unfortunately, right now, because of the way that the market is, a lot of the sellers don't have any place to go because they listed their house. They didn't think we were going to move this quickly. We're closing in 30 to 45 days, and it's like, oh, wait, I have no place to go.
you got to remember, these buyers, they might have only seen that house 2 times.
Yeah.
And
once online.
Yeah. So when that's their first opportunity to see like the bare bones of what the house is with everything out. I mean, some houses they'll buy and it was vacated already, but the majority of the situations you have people living in there. That's their first chance to really see the true size of the living room without all the furniture.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
I do have to say, though, I am seeing more recently than not a lot of estates selling properties. So a lot of the times the house is vacant already.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Well, that's you have this.
Do estates create different challenges for you?
Not really.
Are they easier? Or are they?
Right now, they're a little bit easier because you don't have to move anybody. So you have a vacant home for the most part.
Wow. Yeah.
And the seller is a little bit more driven to sell because with the house just sitting there, they're paying taxes, they're paying carrying costs, they're paying maintenance on the house, and they're not getting anything in return. So they're a little bit easier. It gets sticky when there's family drama.
Yeah, oh my gosh. I know. I mean, Doug knows about it. The just the family, like there's 4 kids and one lives out of state.
Yeah.
And the other one's estranged. And there's 2 people just putting their heads together trying to sell this thing
Right.
What a mess.
Meanwhile, the one that's doing the least has the most to say.
Right. Yeah. Oh, always. And it's always, where's my money?
That's so true.
We had a situation where we were in contract and the seller died.
Oh, man.
I forgot
Oh,
about that
man.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So at
What
that
the heck
point, there was
happens then?
nobody to say they could sell the house. They had to go to probate. Luckily, a unit right across from her came available, and she ended up being able to get out of that. But it took time to get the money back because there was no one to say, okay, here's your money back.
Oh my gosh. So how does somebody get into? How'd you get into the? I'm almost kind of backtracking now, but how does somebody get into real estate? You know, being a real estate attorney, like what does that process look like, and what sort of background do you need, and can you just jump right into it without knowing much, or what did your process look like, and what do you recommend to people trying to become a real estate attorney?
So the answer is yes and no. Yes, you can jump into it, but you need to jump into it with somebody who knows what they're doing. It's kind of like when I'm doing a closing and somebody hires their family member who's an attorney, but they're really just a criminal law attorney.
Wow.
And you're trying to do a closing and they know nothing about what they're doing. And they're like, what's prep? What's acris? What's a deed? And that's like me going to criminal court and trying to defend a criminal. It's not happening. I mean, it's just totally out of my wheelhouse. But, you know, if I studied it, if I had a mentor to do it, I'm sure I could figure it out.
Yeah.
But it's not something that you can just jump into and expect to know and be able to cover all your bases. And there's a lot. And when you're doing real estate law, it's not like you're playing with big money, you know, and it's somebody else's money. So, you know, if you don't know what you're talking about and you're not really guiding them the right way and you can't give them the correct information, you could really put somebody in a bad position.
Yeah.
You know, and there are other attorneys out there that are not very forgiving. You know, there are attorneys that are like, oh, well, you didn't do this and you didn't know that. And, you know, I'm here for the seller and I'm going to take the down payment and I'm going to, you know, and it's a very, you know, people get very, there are attorneys that want to prove that they're really earning their fee.
Yeah.
And those are the attorneys that are charging $8,000 to $10,000. You know, I'm certainly not charging that, but, you know, I'm going to do the best for my client and I'm going to make sure that they're protected. Mm-hmm. So, I mean.
Yeah, so because what you were saying before is like when you could be sitting at closing and there could be some like still some movement in that deal going on, you know, which I think like, you know.
I mean, it's usually minor stuff. It's usually like, you know, there's trash left at the property.
Yeah.
Okay, so seller doesn't want to go back to the house. They don't want to remove it, or they're out of town. You know, they've already moved out of the state.
Yeah.
So they don't want to go back.
Yeah, you got to get a
call the
container.
client and say, what do you want to do? I don't know. I'm like, all right, well, it's probably going to cost, you know, at this point in my career, I've been doing this for 14 years now. Yeah. I can pretty much gauge if somebody says, okay, there's a big dresser, there's a mattress, there's you know, whatever items. All right, $1,000 or $500. I can pretty much gauge what it's going to cost to get rid of the debris.
Yeah, got it. Yeah.
So
1-800-DRUNK. Is that
exactly,
what you call?
Pretty much.
I don't know. That's how do you deal with that stuff?
I've had a situation where the seller, I never even met the seller. I rented the house for them and then I ended up selling it. They were out of state and there was stuff left in the house, and it was stuff that really you would want to keep, like some of the paint, some tools. And the guy brought it up at closing. At the time, my wife was like 9 months pregnant. It's 5 o'clock at night, and I had to go up to the house and put it in a bag. And I'm like, I didn't know what day garbage was, so I was like, look, here, I'm going to put it on the side of the house. When garbage comes, you're bringing it to the curb. But I had to go to Home Depot, buy bags. Then the guy asked me for the bag. Can I borrow one of those garbage bags? I wanted to put him in it. Oh, that was frustrating. But the seller wasn't there.
Yeah.
What else was going to happen? You have to do what you got to do sometimes.
Yeah.
Wow. No way. All right. Well, that's good stuff.
Just talking about sellers not being there, before we were going on, we were talking about powers of attorney.
Yeah.
And how that plays a role in closings and stuff like that. If it's a seller doing a power of attorney, fine. Mm-hmm. But when a buyer does not show up for their closing, it complicates the deal so much to the point where you have to have the bank sign off on everything. You have to have somebody's literally signing the promise to pay back however much money you're borrowing. Like, I would really make an effort to be there.
Wow.
Because it's like you're buying a $500,000 house, $1 million house, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's a substantial amount of
Large sum
money.
of money.
And yeah, exactly. And it's one of those things where you really need to be there. And there's questions that come up at the closing table, what's this key for? And where's the light switch for this? And where's and if you're not there, you can't ask the questions. So it's really to your detriment not to show up to the closing. And if you're going to be buying something, don't plan a vacation. Stay in town.
Yeah.
Don't go away.
Speaking of surprises at closing, how much should somebody look for like the adjustments, and what exactly are they?
Okay, so adjustments are also known as prorations, and basically what happens is there's taxes obviously on every property. So there's county tax, there's school tax, some places have village tax. So the taxes are all due at a certain time frame. Let's go with Yonkers because I know Yonkers very well. So Yonkers runs county tax from January 1st to December 31st. But it's not due until April 15th, I think, I want to say. So when we're doing adjustments at for the closing, we have to give the buyer a credit back if we close before the time it's due. So if we close before April 15th, the buyer gets a credit for the time that the seller owned the house but didn't pay for the taxes yet.
Okay. Yeah, you put that really well.
Okay.
And I didn't know that before that.
Right. So it's one of those things. So you're going to get the benefit of that credit. However, if we close after the 14th of April, we then have to give a credit back to the seller from whatever date we close. So let's say we close on April 20th. So it's from April 20th to December 31st for all of the days that you owned the house that the seller had already paid the full year.
Yeah. And so, but is that, so this April 15th, is that just Yonkers?
It's a lot of municipalities.
Is it?
In Westchester, at least, a lot of the
Is
municipalities are generally
right?
Approximately April 15th.
That's good to know.
Rockland is usually, I feel like Rockland is around January, though.
Possibly.
I think Rockland's more January.
Yeah.
It's usually by county. But then the school tax, you generally speaking, most of the municipalities, it's September and January is when the tax is due for school.
Yeah.
And for village, it's usually, I want to say June and December. Yonkers is different. Yonkers only has a school/city tax, and it's due July, October, and January. So, when you're adjusting for that, you have to adjust from the date of the closing to the end to whatever period they paid.
Yeah.
So it can be an extra, depending on what the taxes are for the year, it can be an additional large sum of money. It could be $5,000, it could be even $10,000, depending on where you're buying, what you're buying. That's going to be an impact on your closing costs. And it's something that a lot of people don't take into consideration. So if your taxes are $20,000 a year just for school tax, and you're buying in January, you're paying half of that back to the seller. So that's a $10,000 hit.
Wow.
That people don't take into consideration.
No.
Going off of that, what are some fees buyers should expect at closing and sellers expect at closing? Because I know sometimes you're not getting that number until 24 hours before the closing, and you're running around trying to figure out which account you're pulling it from. And
so me personally, when I do a contract signing or when I'm, definitely well in the beginning of going into where we would be closing, I'll get a preliminary title bill, or I'll pull an estimated title bill based on what you're buying, what the purchase price is, what your mortgage amount is, and where the property is located. Because those are our big numbers. Our big hit numbers are going to be the title insurance policy, which is the fee policy, and that's to ensure that you're buying a house that's free and clear of anybody else's claims to the property. So you buy the house. If somebody comes and says, oh, no, I own the house, especially when you're buying from an estate. You never know if there's like an extra heir someplace that didn't sign off and nobody told you about. So you want to make sure that you have clean title. And in the event something happens, this one-time insurance policy is going to protect you from that, and they're going to have to reimburse you the entire cost of the house if, in fact, they are wrong, which very rarely happens with the title report. The other fee is the mortgage tax. New York State is the only state that has mortgage tax. Yep.
Really?
Yep. And I think it's it's almost about like 1.8% of the mortgage amount. I think it's 1.65 or 1.56, something like that. Doesn't matter. But, it's a considerable amount of money. So if you're getting, I can't do the math in my head right now, but if it's like a $300,000 mortgage or if it's a $400,000 mortgage, you're paying about, I want to say, $44,000 and change in transfer taxes. I mean, in mortgage taxes. Wow. So those are numbers that you really need to be aware of because they're going to impact you.
Yeah.
And then if you're buying anything over $1 million, you're paying the mansion tax, which is 1% of what your purchase price is. So you're buying something for $1 million, you're paying $10,000 in mortgage tax, in mansion tax. So, and right
those
now,
fees start to add up. And
Yeah.
when you get that figure,
24,
48 hours before closing, it's like
right. And right now, the way that the market is, there's a lot of houses that are over $1 million.
Yeah.
Which is not something that we used to face all that often. You know, I mean, yes, it would happen, but if it's a 1 or a 2 or 3 family home, you're getting hit with mansion tax. If you're buying something commercial over $1 million, no.
Okay.
It doesn't apply there. But for, if you're buying, it's a big number.
You do a lot of work with multifamilies as well. What are things if somebody's buying a multifamily or different challenges that come up that a buyer who's going to be buying a multifamily should be aware of, and things that you look out for as an attorney?
Without question, the tenants. I also do landlord-tenant work, so I represent the landlords. So without question is, what kind of tenant do you have? Is there security? Are there leases? Can we get it vacant? If the rents are low, if you have a problematic tenant, if they have, it's an array of, that's like a whole other show. But I would recommend really vetting the tenant prior to purchasing something, making sure that they sign off on a tenant estoppel letter, which is a notarized document that says and confirms that they acknowledge that this is in fact what they pay in rent, they're not in any arrears, and this is what they have in security. Because if you don't do that and you go to the closing and you've never met the tenant, and you go to the tenant and say, here's your tenant letter, I'm the new landlord, I have this amount of money in my, it says that you gave no security, and they're like, oh no, I gave $2,500 when I moved in, and now you don't have the credit from the seller because the seller swore up and down there was none.
Yeah.
So it's, I really vet and do your due diligence on that one.
Now, with the emergency powers in effect, can you even ask for a house to be vacant?
Yes, but it's going to take time. Some people, I do have 1 or 2 deals where the tenant was friendly with the owner, so they kind of knew that the house was being sold. But that's another thing, is that as the seller, you really need to communicate with your tenant. If you're selling the home, not that they have any right to say no or anything like that, but it's going to be a lot easier transition if you discuss it with the tenant, say, this is what's going on, I'll be selling the property. Do you have any interest in staying? Do you have any desire in staying? Do you want to move? It looks like we're probably going to be closing in the next however many days, and discuss what you want also as a seller. Do you want it vacant? Do you want it occupied? And also for purposes of, home inspections, we need access to that unit.
Yeah.
And the seller can't just say, okay, yeah, go ahead in. You have to have the tenant sign off on that. So that's a whole different.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was really good stuff, Karly. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That was really great. So, how could people reach you, as far as, getting you to represent them as your real estate attorney? Absolutely.
You can call me at the office. My number is 914-965-4221, extension 102, or you can email me at aromanolaw@gmail.com.
Cool. Awesome.
Thank you for coming.
We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.